Good to go. All right, so look, welcome everyone to ACAHUCH's AIA Heritage Award panel discussion for 2025. This is an annual online event that we've had for a number of years now, and it's a very successful one, and we really appreciate everyone tuning in. But first, I'd like to begin this afternoon's proceedings by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place. Here in Melbourne, the land of the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people, and pay respects to their elders and families past and present. So welcome to today's panel discussion, hosted by ACAHUCH, the Australian Centre for Architectural History, Urban and Cultural Heritage here at the University of Melbourne. ACAHUCH is based within the Melbourne School of Design, and it's a research centre established to promote and undertake high quality, collaborative and interdisciplinary research in design, application, theory, history, politics and cultural significance of architectural, urban and cultural heritage. ACAHUCH facilitates, fosters and invites industry partnerships and collaborations, and we also provide professional pathways for graduates of the Masters of Urban and Cultural Heritage, our MUCH program, which is delivered by the Melbourne School of Design. Now, joining us today is Tina Tam from Lovell, Chen. We have Paul Viney. Hi, Paul. Can you give a wave? From FPPV, Toby Reid, and we hope Anna Nervegna from Nervegna Reid, Sam Rosenberg and Andrew Klink from Swanbury Penglase, and Robert Gasparini from Design 5. We have an apology from Annie Tennant from Placemaking New South Wales. But what we're really pleased is to welcome all speakers to discuss their projects in this year's awards ceremony. So what the program of presentations is today is that we're going to run through all of the presentations, and I'm going to be taking questions at the end. If you have a question as we go through, this is to our audience, if you have a question as we're moving through each presentation, please put it in the chat, and Theo Blankley and I will endeavour to monitor them, and we'll also have given a chance for questions from everyone at the very end. And really, what we want to do is to foster a discussion about the awards more generally. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. And look, just if by any chance anyone from Neeson Murcutt Neely is there, that we were hoping that they might join us too. If you're there, sing out now, because that will help us manage time. No? Great. So our first presentation is to be given by Tina Tam of Lovell, Chen. She's talking about two projects, the Tower Hill Wildlife Reserve Centre and also the Philip Smith Centre at UTAS. To introduce Tina, Tina is an Associate Principal at Lovell, Chen. She works on new build and adaptive reuse projects in heritage contexts, and is really a key contributor in the delivery of major architectural projects with that firm. Tina was project architect for Lovell Chen's work on the Tower Hill Wildlife Reserve and also the Philip Smith Centre at UTAS. Her colleague, Michael Cook, was going to join us today, but he's an apology. But Tina, if you could share your screen and present.
Thank you, Philip. I think that's shared now. We can all see it.
Yes, all good.
Great. Tower Hill, the Wildlife Reserve, it's just outside of Warrnambool, for those who might not know. We finished this project and submitted it as part of the Heritage Awards this year. It's a project that's quite special because it's really about the community's care of Tower Hill. And we've very much seen our role in this as something about just honouring and supporting the continued stewardship of the place. So there were some really important groups that we worked with on this project. First and foremost, Parks Victoria, who were our client, but we also had the input from the Robin Boyd expert panel, being because of its significance as Robin Boyd's last building. And we also collaborated with the Eastern Mar Aboriginal Corporation. And in our role here, we were both the architects and the heritage consultant. So we also prepared the conservation management plan for this place. So the Tower Hill Wildlife Reserve is located on the lands of the Mar peoples. It was an abundant food bowl nestled within a dormant volcano. The landscape was devastated by clearing during the 1830s, and in 1959, the local community initiated a regeneration project, which continues to this day. Riding the wave of community action, Robin Boyd was commissioned to design the visitor centre, which was completed in 1971, which makes it his final building. And in 2022, the registered Aboriginal party, Eastern Mar Aboriginal Corporation and Parks Victoria established a partnership for co-stewardship of Tower Hill into the future. So in our research with the conservation management plan, and I think through archives and information provided by the Robin Boyd expert panel, we had quite a lot of information to draw from in our design, which was really great. This is one of Robin Boyd's early concept sketches for the visitor centre, which show the building envisaged as a pure circular form with a roof that emulates the volcanic cones of the area. The interior space was a continuous open volume for exhibitions, with a central model space at the heart to hold the terrain model of the reserve. At one point during the design, the requirement for supporting program, such as toilets and storage, sectioned off.
I mean, you probably will die if you've been shot in the anyway, right? We should say.
Again,
don't hope.
Don't poo and don't get shot in the chest on the wrong
Are you
side.
going to take any
Someone
message from
mute
this podcast?
themselves, please.
All these things about unusual body parts that we're talking about. I think
Can someone mute themselves, please? Sorry about that, Tina.
Thank you. What was I saying? Yes, so there was a threat that the building was going to be sectioned off for practicalities such as offices and storage spaces. But luckily this was never realised, because the Public Works Department then stepped in and offered to construct a new amenities block building to house the supporting program. And it was a really important gesture to keep the visitor centre pure. So the right side is what eventually got built. Based on discussions with Robin Boyd, the amenities block was designed as a blank monolithic form by the Public Works Department and located at the periphery of the visitor centre. The two buildings were linked with a common construction material of local limestone sourced from the area. So for the past decade before we started, the visitor centre has been a shop and a cafe, and the small ranger's office in the amenities block converted into a classroom. Our brief was to provide a base for EMAC for their return to being the stewards of the site, and they needed additional exhibition space and education space, which actually resulted in an overall increase in area that we didn't have. The other challenge was that this brief conflicted with the funding agreement, which was originally based on demolition of the amenities block and its replacement with a standard toilet block and no buildings. And so this is where the support of the expert panel, Parks Victoria and EMAC became really important, because together we advocated for the retention and adaptation of the amenities block to continue its role as a supporting building in honour of the Public Works Department's initial gesture. And through a sleight of hand, the western side of the building was extended by 2 metres. The detailing of the new slot opening was discussed extensively with the builder and expert panel to make sure it was clear as an insertion and buildable with the soft, uneven limestone. We consolidated the bathrooms to one side and used every single millimetre, and this provided the additional space for learning on country. Part of the work, we also upgraded the building envelope with insulation to the walls and roof and new double glazed windows. And all stone from the internal walls was salvaged for reuse to the extension. So this is the completed extension and a before and after view from the visitor centre. The next aspect of the project was really about the conservation. And in our restoration of the visitor centre, we're really acutely aware of our responsibility to maintain the clarity of this pure form, its innate connection to place and its patina of age. Our process was supported by rigorous research and effort and discussion with the expert panel. And in many instances, the decision to do nothing was a conscious one. The first step was to repair the roof. And our research, our access to the drawings helped us understand the composition of the roof with its spare construction of glulam beams, which is an emerging technology at the time, and timber lining boards as both ceiling lining and bracing. And these are some photos of the work being constructed and some excerpts of specifications that we found as well in the archives. And to avoid damaging the brittle timber lining boards, we encapsulated the existing bituminous membrane with a new system. And following a prototyping process, we then cast in the scoria, ensuring it was like the original sourced from the place. And this is the result. The interior of the building has changed from its original honest representation of materials, as shown here, to a very different type of space. So our first move was to remove all of the fittings from the ceilings. We then developed a lighting scheme that uplit the ceiling in the spirit of Robin Boyd's original concept sketches. The lights are fixed to the outer columns and cabling threaded within the cavities. We also stripped the paint from all of the glulam beams, ceiling linings and concrete floors using a non-toxic system to avoid runoff of polluted water into the environment. The slab was sealed with a penetrating sealer for protection while maintaining its patina. And we also tested the wiring within the floor boxes so that we could retain these and avoid cutting into the slab. We collected paint scrapes to understand the sequence of paint coatings. Interestingly, the discovery of a taupey green colour as the earliest coating conflicted with the specification written by Robin Boyd, which called up gloss white. And it seems like Robin Boyd had simply changed his mind along the way and used decking stain in the end. So given the very condition of the timber work and the exposed environment, a decision was made to paint the timber in a colour similar to the decking stain, rather than reinstating the original finish, so we could hold on to as much material as we could. And there's some photos of the completed interior. And the last aspect of this project is really about values and significance. Because of all of the stories that we learned along the way, it was really an important exercise for us to rethink how we assess significance. Without the protection of an individual heritage listing, the amenities block was originally slated for demolition. However, we demonstrated the value of this building based on its relationship as a support building to the visitor centre, its embodiment of community support, its suitability as a base for EMAC, and its embodied energy. With the structure comprising 77% of the building's embodied energy, the retention of the amenities block is a demonstration that reuse of buildings, whether heritage listed or not, should be the first point of call and an urgent solution to climate change. And the last point is the project's central tenet of reinforcing EMAC's presence on country. The eel trap is significant for EMAC as their source of food and identity. We needed to find a meaningful place for this gesture. Throughout the design process, the eel trap was proposed in various locations, but finally settled in the central model space of the visitor centre, which is the symbolic part of the place. We've given this space over to the eel trap to acknowledge change and EMAC's continued presence on site. And the eel trap has been commissioned and it's being made by an Aboriginal artist. So to conclude, in our role as architect, conservation specialist and historian, we have honoured the various groups that have cared for this place. And we really think that the consensus has created an infinitely richer outcome.
Thank you, Tina.
And then I will just jump straight into the Philip Smith Centre.
Yes, please.
This one's a bit shorter. So the Philip Smith Centre is located, it's a campus called the Domain campus just outside the CBD of Hobart. And again, in our role here, we were the heritage consultant as well as the architect. So the Philip Smith Centre is located on the Domain campus, as I just said. The Domain campus is important because it's the founding campus of UTAS. And the building itself was designed by the Public Works Department and remodeled by Rudolf Koch and constructed in 1909 and 1910. And there were probably just a few things I wanted to talk about with our design process today. The first thing was really our intent to capture the building's spirit. The building was designed to progressivist principles, and this was grounded in a belief that education should stimulate psychological and social well-being in students, and it promoted a hands-on or experiential approach to learning. This was translated into a very clear plan of generous teaching spaces with large windows for natural light, large double height verandas on each end, providing fresh air. The interior scheme had minimal ornament with dust-resistant finishes such as painted hard plaster and pressed metal ceilings. So our first step was to peel back the later interventions to restore the progressivist design principles of well-being, fresh air, and natural light. The original plan of the classrooms was restored to provide teaching spaces, and the art room in the attic adapted to provide an office or teaching space, self-sufficient with its own amenities. The later infills to the verandas were also removed to provide breakout spaces. And these are some of the before and after photos. This is before and after. Before up in the attic and after. The second part of our approach for this project was designing with nuance and avoiding harm. We consider the most important part of our design to be what we didn't build here. And that was important for reducing the carbon, the embodied carbon, but also for minimizing harm to the building. The requirements to bring buildings up to compliance with current code can be extremely invasive, risking damage to the fabric and loss of architectural intent. So together with our team of engineers, we undertook a detailed audit of the existing condition that ultimately supported the retention of the existing structures and services. To reduce the operational energy, we started with a fabric-first approach. This building is unique for its large windows and still had interiors which were very intact. The condition limited our ability to retrofit insulation externally, internally, or within the brick walls. Instead, we targeted the areas where works were already occurring. We upgraded the roof with additional insulation, airtightness ceiling, and replaced the damaged clerestory windows with new high-performance versions. And as part of the refurbishment of the double-hung windows, we installed draft seals. To provide fresh air, because we were designing this during COVID, and this was particularly topical, we drew inspiration from the building's passive ventilation tubes. We then undertook a careful comfort analysis, which confirmed the fact that most of the building only required heating and that the attic was the only space with temperature fluctuations that justified active cooling. The analysis and building fabric upgrades significantly reduced the heating and cooling demand and ultimately allowed us to incorporate a very low-tech mechanical solution of electric heating panels and split air conditioning units into a building with pressed metal ceilings and no ceiling cavities. And the culmination of these careful moves is that we were able to achieve a reduction in upfront carbon of 26.79% when comparing new materials only and 76.7% compared to a reference case where a new structure was built. And lastly, this project is about a commitment to the community. It's been an important project in demonstrating the Utah's commitment to give back, because the building has had quite a rich social history and is very much cherished by both the local community and people around the city. Before the university reacquired the building in 2020, it had actually been owned by the Hobart Discovery Incorporation, which was an organisation formed by local residents to preserve and make the building available for community use. So despite this being a heritage building, the other aspect that we were keen to deliver on was inclusivity. So although it was a heritage building, we were committed to meeting minimum industry standards for inclusivity and universal design. So through careful interventions, we were able to make the whole building fully accessible by including new entrance ramps and lifts discreetly located within the veranda. And to avoid the lift overrun projecting view on the roofline, we tucked in a second transfer lift into the attic. All the classroom spaces were fitted with remote learning technology to provide remote access for students with differing backgrounds across the state. And the final part is the conservation. So we repaired and braced all of the stonework walls for the facades. The works are carefully scoped to achieve a balance between holding on to as much fabric as possible and considering the lifespan of the material to last another 50 years before another significant upgrade would be done. The cast iron downpipes were retained and reset, and where possible, sandstone lintels repaired in situ. We conducted paint analysis to conform the paint scheme, and the verandas were restored through paint removal. The cast iron lacework was restored, and as a new intervention, we introduced a new set of guillotine windows behind them to allow for weather conditions. I think all of this together are really the moves that we have made to make the building relevant. And I will finish at that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Tina. Terrific. And thank you for keeping to time. So our second presentation involves Parliament House stone restoration works here in Melbourne, and presenting on behalf of FPPV is Paul Viney. He's a director of FPPV Architecture. Paul has had a long association with Victoria's Parliament House and over 40 years' experience of working within the building and within the Victorian Parliamentary Precinct. Paul's got expertise in a range of other complex projects, including critical infrastructure projects for both the private and public sectors. These include the State Operations Centre, the Emergency Coordination Centre, the Police Operations Centre, and the Primary Data Centre for the University of Melbourne. So, Paul, welcome. And if you can share your screen, please.
Thanks, Philip. Okay, is that visible now?
Yes, it is. Thank you. All good.
Great. Just as a starting point, the stonework restoration project was actually a lot more than just stonework restoration. It included both stone repair and replacement, but also principal building fabric, which included roofs, windows, doors, structural repairs, rainwater goods, services upgrades, stormwater upgrades, and importantly, included a lot of the removal of old services that have been run around the building over the decades. The project was initially an archaeological project as such, and in much of the project there were no existing condition drawings, and we were discovering how the building was built as we were actually going through the process of work. It was a labour of love. The project ran over 18 years, and the final price was just under $100 million for the total for the works. The building was designed by John George Knight and Peter Kerr, and was built over 73 years, from 1856 to 1929, but never completed, neither the north wing nor the the south wings were ever finalised. It was a seat of Victorian Parliament since 1856, except for a period between 1901 and 1927 when it was actually the federal parliament. And the last phase of the project, the refreshment wing, was built as a gift from the federal government after that parliament sat there for that period. Originally, the building was supported and maintained by the Public Works Department construction group, which was dismantled in 1987, and after that, virtually very little maintenance was done. Interestingly, one of the apprentice stonemasons from Public Works Department at that time was ultimately the master stonemason for the project. There's a lot of problem in lack of maintenance. There's a prevailing opinion that money shouldn't be spent on MPs, and the funding and the political, which will look after the building, did not exist. So there's no political intent. There was a package of works let in the mid-90s to address superficial issues with stone deterioration, lead cappings and structural bracing of the parapets. But that was the only work that was basically done. In 2005, there was a Department of Parliamentary Services created, which provided the opportunity for this project to proceed. In 2006, there was a large section of cornerstone that actually fell off the building. And if it had fallen 20 minutes earlier, it would likely have hit a minister doing a press conference. So there was a sudden urgency to address what was going on. There's a lot of public publicity at the time in terms of it was quite an important building, but it had been let to go to rack and ruin. There was what was known as the Chook House out the back where the MPs were stationed. So the idea was to try and get this thing back into a state of quality repair. But in order to do that, there was a funding process that was required, and the department engaged us to undertake a feasibility study to relocate Parliament House to the southern end of Spring Street over the railway yards, to look at the cost benefit analysis of upgrading the current building versus building a new building. The upgrade, the new build was going to cost 2.4 billion at that stage. So the department the Treasury decided they would spend the money on upgrading the building. And ultimately there was an ongoing funding basis, which is available on an annual basis, which is why it took the 18 years to do the project, because it was a staged process on both funding and also works. So we were engaged in 2006 to undertake an annual stonework audit, where we were required under a knuckle boom device to go around and touch every stone to test its current rigidity and safety. What we found was that many of the repairs that had been done in the 90s were actually the root cause of the current problems, because water ingress problems had never been solved. So we had large sections of stone that were falling away. You can see the sections of the dentils that were falling away, sections of the stone above that were coming apart. So there was really significant problems with the building, and the Department of Parliamentary Services decided that it needed a much more holistic approach to do these works, and we were actually given a notional 50-year repair target, so that there should be no further works required within the next 50 years. So it was a bit more than traditionally were done. We didn't do indent repairs with traditionally or concrete repairs. We actually put block repairs in throughout the process. It had a more holistic approach to traditional stonework restoration, because we had to make sure we had no water ingress. We had to address structural movement, cleaning and repointing of all facades, dismantling and resetting of parapets and chimneys, replacing entire roofs, gutters, substrates and rainwater goods, restoring windows, doors, replacing drumming render, removing redundant services and fixings, upgrading existing services, and full block replacements. So some of the block sizes we put in were, when we bought the blocks, they were 1.4 bedding depth and up to 1.8 by 2.4 metres long in the stone we bought. The O'Connor and Sons were the stonemasons, and they undertook all stages of the project. The team inspected the facade. You can see us up on the knuckle boom there, identifying every crack to laminated stone, rotting timber work, deteriorated metal work, and outline a scope of repairs. We ultimately produced 340 detailed drawings to identify every block and fabric element on the building, and then scoping and procurement was scheduled to ensure the contract at the next stage was executed prior to the previous stage's completion, allowing continuous work around the building without delay. In sourcing the sandstone, we faced similar challenges to occur in the original builders. The original stone for the building, for the library wing at the rear of the building, came from a quarry in near Bacchus Marsh called the Darley Quarry, which has been closed for decades. And even at the time of construction, Kerr considered this as an inferior stone, but it was chosen because of its cost at that point in time. The stone had many replacements over the years. You can see some of the damage there that going through it. So we looked initially, we used the SPRI report to identify sandstones throughout Australia and identified some quarries down in Tasmania, some of which were open, some of which weren't even open at that time. We ultimately chose a quarry called Melbourne, which provided the most suitable product for the matching of the material at the library side of the building. Unfortunately, the stone, after 6 months of trips down to the quarry, they produced less than 20 cubic metres of an order of 560 metres that was placed. So ultimately we had to cancel that contract and find an alternative. The alternative was found based on some experience from the stonemason, from a material they had used for the Melbourne Law Building, and it came from the Udelfanger quarry, which is in the Trier region of Germany. I'll just jump through some of these. So that's the Udelfanger quarry. It's quite extraordinary in the way in which the stone comes out of the ground. It's you can see the bedding depth being pointed out by the chap on the right. The stone actually comes out of the ground virtually uncut. It comes out in pieces, and we were able to then ship those pieces back to Australia to actually do the cutting from. So the stone was found to have the closest match to the materials and properties and texture and colour of the replacement stone for stages 2 to 5, which was the back of the building around the library areas. But the rest of the building had been built from stone from Storr, from the Heatherley quarry at Mount Difficult range of the Grampians. Now that had ceased to operate in the 40s. It has been used for a period after that for historic restoration on blocks previously available or cut, but they had been exhausted some time ago, and there'd been some inappropriate practice by a contractor who had blasted the face of the quarry and had left it in a poor state, and the First Nations decided that there would be no further use of it, and it was covered by the native title claims. So we went through a similar exercise of identification of stone and testing for the remaining stages, and the remaining stone came from Poles Creek quarry in Gosford, New South Wales. The only problem was that this creek also supplied a product called Guinea gold. And what happened was once the stone was taken out of the ground, it would sit for several weeks, but it could actually change colour completely from the buff colour that we required to a bright orange gold colour. And it was only after you'd taken it out of the ground and left it for the quarry sap to dry that the colour became apparent. So in overall sense, there was 1,500 tonnes of sandstone put into the building, a majority of which was Australian. And there was 100 tonne of by Victorian Bamstone quarry down in Port Fairy. Wherever possible, the stone that was salvaged from the building was reused during the process. So anywhere we could take a section of blockwork out, reduce it, cut it back, put it back into another section, that was done. So we had no material that was taken from the building actually went to landfill at all. So everything was actually reused or put in the road base. One of the key things that was done, the bituminous membrane on the cornerstone had broken down right throughout, and that was where we were getting water through between the cornerstones, getting down into the dentils below and causing the repair work. So we actually came up with some details from old documents on using copper flashings throughout. So it was detailed as it would have been done in the 1880s. Very little fixings, mostly done with sleeve joints, providing a waterproof barrier to stop water getting into the stone as it went forward. When we originally were proposed to do the work, we thought we were replacing large sections of the cornerstone, but we found that it actually was full depth. It went from front, the actual inner wall to the outer corners of the building in one complete stone. So techniques had to be developed to enable that stone to be cut and to be then large sections have been inserted into the cornice itself. So virtually the whole of the cornerstone around the whole building has been replaced. So that's, you can see the details there of how the new indent repair was done over the original cornerstone. The project employed a mix of technologies and traditional craftsmanship. Stonemasons used multi-access CNC technology to mill stone to appropriate sizes before delivery of all intricate carving and final dressing completed by hand using century-old techniques. Early in the piece, the issue of silica was identified and measures put in place to ensure the safety of all occupants and stone works. These included establishing vacuuming stations with HEPA filters to enable the site to be cleaned morning and evening. Special cutting booths were established to reduce noise to adjacent occupants and reduce dust. One of the really critical things of this was all done whilst the building was being used and occupied. So we had a situation where sitting days we couldn't work on the site at all. So we had to work around the sitting day calendar, which was a challenging thing for all parties. One of the key aspirations of the project was the transfer of specialist heritage skills to the next generation. And a number of apprentices that actually started on the project were employed to work for over 15 years on the actual project. So we actually employed and educated a range of stonemasons during the course of this project. Copper flashings were introduced to cornices and parapets to prevent water ingress. This is the CNC machine, some of the windows being done. So that's the copper flashings that were introduced. New details for developing fixing of the copper flashing gutters and flashings based on research and traditional techniques. So basically that's the sort of the extent of the project. At the end of the day, a lot of people looked at it and said, well, what have you actually done? It looks like it originally did, which is, we think, the greatest compliment that could actually be given, that we've left it in a condition that will be hopefully the next 50 years, and it's back to its shining best. Just quickly, you just get a couple of ideas of some of the work that's been done. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paul. We'll keep moving. Our next presentation is about the Central Goldfields Art Gallery, and Toby Reid from Nervegna Reid is presenting. Toby's a director with Anna Nervegna of the firm, and Reid Nervegna focus on a whole variety of architectural projects, and including, I should say, an award-winning film they made a couple of years ago, about Peter and Dione McIntyre. And they've had multitude of wins and commendations for projects like the Victorian Quaker Centre, Judo House, a 30-kilometre master plan for Daju in China, and various precinct energy projects. So, Toby, please present on the Central Goldfields and share your screen.
Yep. Okay. Right. Hi, everyone. All right. So now I'm going to talk about Central Goldfields Art Gallery, which is in Maryborough, which is in Jajawarong country. Maryborough has sort of got a big axis, and at one end is this enormous train station. It's a Goldfield sort of town, and at the other end is this, which is the old town hall and the fire station, which had been used as a fairly rundown art gallery, and so we were commissioned or won the tender to convert it. So this is the state we found it in. It was fairly dilapidated. It was a real mess inside, like there were like walls everywhere. It was originally built in 1861. Then the tower, which is really beautiful, was built in 1891. And there was lots of interventions since, including putting like suspended ceilings in the main space and all sorts of things. So, and then there's this back area which was used for parking. And so part of the original grant application was to rejuvenate the art gallery into a contemporary space which could be used, and they could borrow artworks from around the world or other art galleries, and also to do an Indigenous interpretive garden, which would also be like a sculpture garden in this car spot. So these are some of the interiors. You can see every room was pretty much at a different level, so there was no accessibility at all. And the first thing we thought about was like, what are we going to do? All we can do, there's not much budget, it's very, very low budget, is erase, like subtract rather than sort of add to this building. Okay, so we sort of devise sort of systems of subtraction and how to sort of erase certain things and create different relationships and different spatialities, I suppose, through the idea of just erasing, like designing with a rubber as opposed to a pen. In just the background of our thinking, like Marcel Duchamp, being an art gallery, we thought his idea of the ready-made, and in particular the adjusted ready-made, was really important to us. You can see the bicycle wheel, which is grafted to the stool here. This is his studio in 1916. And so this idea of changing meanings of an object through slight interventions, okay? And you can see that with the fountain and the comb, where he's just inscribed on them and then changes the meaning. So we're quite interested in how we can change the meaning from the original Victorian ideology. And that was part of the brief, in that we had to include Jara histories and Jara narratives and allow for not just like a sort of reconstruction of the Victorian narrative, I suppose. So obviously Gordon Matter Clark came from the sort of Duchamp sensibility of treating buildings as ready-mades and then doing actions to them, in this case, cutting out. And we also thought of this idea of, I suppose, that even traditional architecture is very much like an exquisite corpse, and a bit like the Duchamp stool, where you've got Bramante, then Michelangelo, then Giacomo della Porta and Bernini constantly adding to each other's works. So we're just thinking about these sort of ideas, and also thinking about how do we get rid of, or how do we sort of allow the Jara histories and stories to inhabit the gallery, which is very much built in the Victorian system. And so this was a good example that we experienced years ago, where basically you got one ideology imposed on another one, and we just in Cordoba, obviously. So you got Christian and Muslim intersecting and carving out of each other. So we did these. We worked with the Jara team in Wataka, and we proposed these cuttings through of the gallery, so that we could create sort of new spatial relationships in the gallery, but also between the garden and the gallery. So this is the existing plan. The red walls are all the ones that were eradicated or erased, and wherever we've done that, we've kept a trace in the floor plan, pretty much. And this is that's what it was like during the construction as we were demolishing those walls. So this idea of erasure, we thought was quite an interesting design technique. Okay, so you can see here's the new plan, and in order to get accessibility, we took the space that was kind of between different stages of the buildings, and they were very much like rabbit warren areas, like very unusable. And we put a ramp in here, which is down between two different, like the 1861 building and the 1891 building. And sort of joined every different level in the building through this stepped ramp. So it just steps at different levels, okay? And you can see here, then we cut views through to the garden. So you've got the admin here, you've got the collection store here, you've got what became a ramp gallery and then the main gallery, and you've got views cutting right through. And then we also decided to cut views through to the towers. And so all of these are kind of diagramming those different spatial views that we did. On the outside, we didn't do a lot, but what we did do was we painted the doors red as a kind of pretty obvious gesture about fire stations, but also put the insignia of the gallery on in reflective tape. So just slight markings, and then you can see the skylights that we've done. And obviously the tower was very important to the building. It's actually the only bit that we could not touch. The rest of the building, there's all various heritage overlays, but the tower was something that really was untouchable, and we didn't really want to touch it. But what we wanted to do was create a kind of dialogue with it. So we want to see the tower in ways that maybe the Victorians didn't originally. This is Auntie Marilyn, who led the design team for the garden, and it was her idea that the council should do this garden in the first place. So this is one skylight we cut out in the entry hall, which sort of aims at, when you walk around and you look up and you get this kind of cinematic glimpse of the top of the tower. So that's it there. You can see it's like a triangle, dropping into the ceiling. And then you stand over here and you see the tower. And then underneath the shape of the tower, we then cut through the building, okay? So these arches in a way look like they were always there, but they weren't. But they're just like a sort of, I suppose, a cutting tool or something from the original architecture. Oh, and by the way, this brick wall here is the oldest brick wall in the building. So we sort of cut away the plasterboard, which was like I suppose the white cube gallery, the sort of, the sort of modern white cube gallery, cut away to reveal the history of the building. Then we did another one in the ramp area. And you can see here, when you stand in the middle of the ramp gallery, you look up and you can see the tower. And we opened the doors over here where you couldn't originally see through to the street. And also over here, we've cut through the sort of admin and the collection store into what is now the Indigenous garden. At this point, the garden hadn't been planted. So you can see that's the garden finished. These are the skylights that aim up at the tower. So we're trying to sort of preserve or sort of show the Victorian architecture in a way that the Victorians probably wouldn't have ever done it themselves, I suppose. So opening up new ways of experiencing the 19th century reality. So these doors we put in, we sort of restored the doors and we put a big glass sliding door behind. So different gallery situations, they can either have them closed or open, depending on the requirements of the different show. These are the diagrams of how we organized all the spaces. And you can see here, like, so through here is now, that's what it looks like now. And that's really bad photos I took of the garden on the outside. But you can just see the kind of connection that we created. And here, some more cut throughs. So we went standing in the main gallery, looking through the foyer and through to the underside of the tower, which is now planted, obviously. Okay. So all these photos were taken just before the garden construction happened. And this one you see from the front door. When you walk in the front door, you can get this glimpse, and that's what you see. Okay. And this is the main gallery. And the one on the left is the one that cuts through through the admin and through into the garden. And at night, you can see into the gallery from the garden. So it's kind of an interesting relationship that you get. This is where some demolition happened and we needed columns. So we created this sort of column, which also stops people falling off the ramp. And as we took away all the layers of carpet that were there, and there was all this ceiling was revealed because all of this was hidden previously, and there were walls all over this room. And we found things like the original footprints of the people who had laid the slabs, many years ago. And you can see here where we've demolished walls, we've got a different color concrete in there, so you can kind of get a sense of the plan of how it's mutated. And this is the outside before, then kind of after. Details. This is the education room at the back. So this was a bit of a shed, which funnily enough was protected, but it was a useless shed. So we got permission to change it. And we put this polycarbonate sort of moon wall in the education room. So during the daytime, it shines like a moon on the inside, and at night, you get this effect in the garden. This is before the garden was constructed. And then, yeah, so you can see there how it changes. And that's the smoking ceremony and the collection store. So it's all, the collection store is visible to our visitors as they walk through. It's a very small gallery, and yeah, so it's all quite like even when something's in storage, you can see it through these windows, and they can rotate the paintings. It's just, I think, the first opening they had. That's the ramp gallery. And that's it. Thank you.
Toby, thanks so much. Well
I
done.
can't hear you, Philip.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, wait.
Thank you, Toby.
Yes, sorry, I had on
Mute too.
sound.
Thank you very much. I'm going to
That's
keep us
all right.
moving, but
Yeah,
thank
stop
you.
sharing.
Stop sharing, please.
Yep.
Our next presentation, if Andrew and Sam, if you can start sharing your screen while I introduce you. Our next presentation is on Union House at the University of Adelaide. From Swanbury, Penglase, we have Andrew Klenke and Sam Rosenweig. Andrew has over 25 years experience working with and understanding traditional buildings. He has a deep knowledge of South Australia's heritage places, and is really renowned for his attention to detail and commitment to quality. Sam is a registered architect and a member of the heritage team at Swanbury, Penglase, and both have been involved in this, but I'm looking forward to hearing about this very interesting work at Union House at the University of Adelaide. So thanks, Sam and Andrew.
Thanks, Philip. Really appreciate the invitation and opportunity to participate today. I'd like to compliment also the previous presenters on their fabulous projects. Sam and I are actually coming to you from Ghana country in Tandanya, Adelaide, which is also the location of the project we're presenting today. And we pay our respects to Ghana elders past and present. Union House is an reactivation project of a complex of buildings which is included on the South Australian Heritage Register. The project was completed in stages, ready for delivery in 2024 to celebrate the university's 150th anniversary. Known as the Union Building Group, it's located on the university's North Terrace campus in central Adelaide, and it addresses Victoria Drive and Karawera Parry, the River Torrens. For 80 years, the Union Building was the heart of academic life at the university. The host of protests and festivals, the building provided many different facilities for students and the community, including refectories, but also meeting places. There's a theatre there, a cinema, art studios, originally squash courts, a celebrated bar and bookshop, and even a bank branch. It was the first of the buildings erected for the university's expansion onto the lower part of the campus closer to the river in the 1920s. It was the work of Walter Bagot of Woods, Bagot, Jury and Laybourne Smith, and his neo-Georgian design was inspired by the work of Christopher Wren and contained a refectory and equitable student spaces around a central cloister. Dixon and Platten, with Robert Dixon as the lead, was responsible for its major redevelopment and expansion in the 1960s and early 70s, which was to see the complex treble in size. Pioneers of the Adelaide regional style, their design for Union House reflected the friendly, more relaxed form of modernism for which they were known. The result is an inspiring example of contextual design, honestly expressed, without replicating the earlier style, and it's considered to be one of their finest works, and at the time was recognised by a number of awards, and including more recently the inaugural 25-year award in 2005. However, due to various decisions associated with the university, more recently, the Union Building actually lost its people. The university wanted to rectify the situation, but they felt restricted by its heritage listing. Our involvement actually originally commenced preparing a revision of the conservation management plan for the building, which helped us to understand its significance and identify opportunities that would not distract from its heritage values. Despite its sad state, Union House had, however, proven itself to be resilient and durable. A series of guiding principles informed the response, recognising its importance while fostering its transformation. Throughout this process, we've been very mindful of every decision we make. And throughout, our intention has been to provide an enduring contribution worthy of the place. The original palette of materials, which includes face brick, natural coloured concrete, both off form and in situ, pre-finished timber, terracotta roof tiles, quarry floor tiles, and compressed straw ceiling panels, was respected and conserved, and complemented by new elements that distinguish it old from new while remaining subservient to the architectural context. Materials were salvaged and reintegrated, while in fact the work associated with the straw ceiling panels, many of which had to be reproduced, has really helped to revitalise the straw ceiling panel manufacturing process. Existing functions were relocated to more logical locations, creating diverse spaces that cater for students, staff, and the broader community. The works have bridged all 7 levels of the complex, but the major changes were mainly focused on 3 levels. Level 2, improved connection to the surrounding lower campus and the wider public realm, activated through the creation of new performance spaces and the relocation of the well-known Unibar to this level and the reimagining of the cloister. Level 4 included reinforcing connections to the upper campus with a diverse range of student-focused spaces, including a relocation of the fitness hub. Level 5 provides the university community with spaces to gather, meet and socialise in a new restaurant and suite of function rooms.
Given the building had a complex patchwork of slab construction, an early soft demolition phase allowed for desktop studies to be reviewed on site. Through these investigations, some structural deficiencies were found and a new carbon fibre plates were introduced to meet current live loading requirements. All these interventions were concealed not to detract from the detail and volume of spaces. A seismic review demonstrated that the building performed surprisingly well, but some additional restraint was needed. The visually disruptive later balustrade infills between the original precast balustrade rails were replaced and tested through prototyping, and what we see here is the result from the exterior cloister view and then also down the balcony. Particularly challenging was the replacement of all services in a building with few opportunities for concealment. Completed in 2019 was the redevelopment of the cloisters, creating a multifunctional space used for campus and community events. This was supported by the relocation of the Uni Bar, strengthening its reputation as a live music venue in Adelaide. Additionally, refurbishment of the former refectories created performance spaces. This stage allowed for greater use opportunities to the lower areas of the complex. The reimagining of the former Union Bookshop into student spaces reversed unsympathetic changes that broke up its sequence of vertical spaces and opened it to the cloister. A range of other student spaces have been added, servicing a diverse range of student groups that previously might not have had a hub of their own. To allow the redevelopment of level 5, the fitness hub was given a new home on level 4, resulting in a unique gym offering. A key component has been the integration of a restaurant into the precinct. Taikundi, the Ghana word meaning join, unite, partner together, is the culmination of stakeholder engagement with the broader university community. As a place of collaboration between academic staff, students, and the broader Adelaide community, a range of function suites have been created. These cater for a broad range of function typologies and sizes closely relating to the scale and feel of each individual space. Throughout the project, circulation patterns by the external balconies were restored, and the original colour wayfinding strategy was renewed through the cast numerals to the stairwells and finishes within the circulation zones of the building. Meeting all its ambitious objectives, the project has revitalised the building and returned it to the heart of campus life. Its success is evident in its renewed popularity among students, staff, and the public, forging new connections between the university and the wider South Australian community. Importantly, it has helped to shift the university's perspective on the value, opportunities, and potential of its important collection of heritage buildings. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Andrew and Sam. Terrific stuff. So our final presentation this afternoon is from Design 5. Robert Gasparini is joining us to talk about White Bay Power Station. Robert's a registered architect and a senior associate at Design 5. He's a member also too of Australia ICAMOS. His involvement with White Bay Power Station began in 2002 when he helped prepare the first CMP for the site, followed by updates in 2013. And he's now working on the third edition of the CMP, which is due later this year. He was project architect for the conservation and activation works at White Bay Power Station, which was commissioned by Placemaking New South Wales and completed in early 2024. So, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity too. I'll share this screen. I think. Okay. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. I'll put it on full screen mode. View full screen. Okay, I think you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, all
Perfect.
right. I'll
Thank you.
move this aside. Sorry. I need to get that smaller. There we go. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present. This is the White Bay Power Station, and thank you for the introduction. Our client was Placemaking New South Wales, and any tenant is an apology today. She can't be here. She's also an architect, but there were many other people involved from Placemaking also involved in the site. Let me just... Oh, I click. Okay. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the land of the Gadigal, and I pay respects of the elders past and present. This is the land in which the White Bay Power Station is situated on. It should be knocked down. Now, this was our premier at the time, Perrottet's declaration in 2020. It's not a great start, but we knew we had something to prove. The site is located at the head of the White Bay. We're in Sydney. The White Bay Power Station was built in 1917 to supply electricity to the rail and tram networks, and was modified in the 1950s to serve the domestic consumers. It was decommissioned in 1980s and listed on the State Heritage Register in 1999. Is now part of the Bays West renewal, with the next door having the future metro station, which will connect Sydney to Parramatta, currently being built. The building is significant for many reasons, and some of these include it's the longest serving power station in Sydney and is an icon of the area's industrial origins. So I'll just get this away. There we go. The building is also significant as retaining a significant slice of machinery for electricity production. In essence, the building is a machine, and it's some of its parts make this place remarkable. The diagram on the right-hand side is a diagram of the coal and the electricity generation process, and the building itself is almost as a machine. And the building, and as you can see in the north elevation, it's a diagram of the diagram on the right. So our work, the project was driven by three principles as detailed in the CMP. The first one being community, that is to engage with its surroundings and maintain a landmark status. The second, heritage, guided by the Borough Charter and the CMP. And the third, public access, that is meaningful and equitable. Based on these principles, our project involved two parts. The first being conservation, repair, and preservation. As a list, I won't go through all of these, but I've listed some of those, some of the repair on the right-hand side. And the second part was implementing community activation through public access, and that included stairs, ramps, BCA upgrades, services, administration, external landscape, and site security. Our work started with diagnosis, documentation, and detailed understanding. It required months of site investigation and a fondness of heights. This project was architecturally led with regular site walks with engineers and builders. This is a typical example of a column base repair. The one on the left was repaired, and the one on the right was replaced with bolts and not rivets. We didn't date stamp, but the details, access was key at the early stages, a chance for refinement. The original cladding was not watertight, so the details were redesigned without impacting the overall appearance. We didn't date stamp, but the details differ on close inspection. The cladding is Z600 galvanized sheets in 3-meter lengths. Our methods were honest. The replacement will rust and patina with age, as did the original. The roofs make up a vast area, and prolonged leaking had caused enormous internal damage. An invisible intervention was adapting the roofs to meet the current 1 in 100-year rainfall, which they weren't originally designed for. We had many facade types, each requiring technical knowledge to specify repairs. Repairs was a process of investigation and prototyping. Let's just show some rendering brickwork. We had, as you saw before, galvanized steel. The basement of the coal handling shed was a unique issue. It was where the coal was first delivered to the site and contains an 8-meter deep basement housing elevators, conveyors, and these were completely flooded. Here we pumped, cleaned, treated rust, strengthened steel, and installed services. Our interventions are almost invisible. Close to 80 meters tall, the chimneys are a local landmark. They present a unique set of problems and opportunities. The external ladders had failed and the Sydney Metro were boring a tunnel 12 metres directly below them. The entire chimney was strengthened and protective coatings applied in a colour to match the original. The chimney ladders were removed and repaired. New and old were differentiated in detail. Part of the decontamination scope was to encapsulate lead paint. We approximate about 60,000 square metres of walls and 30,000 linear metres of steel. Colour matching of each of the space was ongoing role, and the colour was tested thoroughly before application. And decontamination also included the replacement of asbestos sheets and the removal of pigeons and their remains. We had lead dust and several other things. So part 2 was about activation and public access. The coloured areas, this is a site map of the White Bay Power Station, and the coloured areas illustrate where we had public access. At ground level, we needed to integrate with the surrounding community. The site was reoriented from the south to the north, with an entry forecourt created from Robert Street. Future connections from the south were also needed to be considered, and the circles indicate where new stairs, lifts, ramps, and carefully considered for function, egress, and engagement. Our goal was to create spaces that were a celebration and engaging, an opportunity to challenge the perceptions of reuse. We researched each location. We designed for minimal alteration, a loose fit, and that was fully reversible. New elements are not only functional, but also allow users to pause and appreciate each space from a unique perspective. We used existing voids. Each insertion needed to belong. We had to fit a multi-purpose lift in a location that would service all levels and cause the least impact. Public area flooring is upgraded to BCA AS 1428, but not at the expense of erasing the evidence of use. The ground floor in the turbine hall was too damaged for repair. So this was one place where we had to sheet over the existing floor. Otherwise, we would have had a complete loss of the fabric. And this was done for about half of the turbine hall. Machinery plinths pretty much everywhere throughout the complex. They presented a potential danger and trip hazards. Rather than demolish, we found innovative uses for retention. We created spaces that are a place for gathering and free to roam and to minimize barriers. The building must also be flexible and has already been used for shows, concerts, and community events and art festivals. We reinserted platforms. In this space in the south of the turbine hall, we reinserted platforms around a central area to create an auditorium. The brief also required admin offices, so we repaired and repurposed the administration block in the original entrance. This was a bridge over one area in which we had to provide DDA access, so we bridged over the bridge, essentially. Inside the administration, again, we worked with the bones we had, and we did as much as necessary, but as little as possible. To finish, I'll just do a bit of a tour through all the spaces within the power station. So this is the coal handling shed where coal was delivered to the site. And this was the incline conveyor within the coal handling shed. So the coal went up here and into the boiler house. This is the boiler house. So the coal would have dropped through to these hoppers and into the coal crushers. These are the coal crushers on the ground floor. And this is where the coal was crushed just before it was being blown into the furnaces, where it would create the water. So every move was researched and every intervention was considered. So this was the control room within the boiler house. It's another view of the chimney. So we didn't set out, this is a pump house just next to the turbine hall. So we didn't set out to create a new identity. Our role was not to impart a new architectural branding in a sense. The place already had its identity, and we had to use that and preserve that. So it was to manage the scope and to show restraint. And this is the turbine hall. This is a 140-metre long hall, and it has its remnant machinery at the northern end. So we had to be honest and careful in everything we had to do. And this is the switch house, and the image on the left is the transformer alley. And this is the control room. So we had an amazing team, and each brought their unique expertise, which were dedicated to the principles set out. Many of the people in this photo are the builders, project managers, the clients, and some of the consultants. So from a demolition site to an asset, we hope to have left the White Bay Power Station as an asset and a legacy for Sydney. So thank you very much.
Robert, thank you so much. How impressively well timed you are. That was just fantastic. So thank you. If you could stop sharing your screen.
There we go.
Thank you. And look, thanks everyone for presenting. We've now got some time for questions, and because we have to finish right on 1:30. Some questions have already appeared in the chat, and Paul Johnston has asked a question, Tina, about the Philip Smith Centre. Can you explain the decision to return the building to its original state and to remove elements that were part of the changing teaching curriculum during the life of the building as a teaching college, such as the theatre stage, which was used for drama and film, and the art room in the attic, especially given that these were much used and loved by the community?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that. I think part of the decision was really based on the university's brief as well, because in converting this to be a teaching facility, they needed everything to be a flat floor teaching space. And so in that instance, things like the stage couldn't reasonably be kept because what they needed to use the space for. I think the main driver for removing interventions to restore the original progressivist principles is probably most strongly reflected with the verandas, because they've been infilled with the fire stairs and toilets over time. And because we found an alternative solution for that, we were then able to open those areas up.
Great. Thanks, Tina. Robert, there's a question about the percentage of the total project cost. How much was allocated to site decontamination?
Yeah, good question. And it was actually quite a lot. So when we started off with the project, it was an $86 million budget that's publicly known, and that was for the conservation. And then there was $15 million allocated for the reuse, so the activation. So around a $100 million total budget for the project over 2 years. The decontamination part of that was considerable. I don't know the exact figure, but it was a lot. For periods of time, we had the entire building, for example, the turbine hall, the photo I showed of that 140-meter long room was completely sealed and decontaminated of lead paint. One of the big issues here is all surfaces were painted in lead paint, and we needed to encapsulate most of that. Otherwise, it just wasn't safe. The paint was peeling, and we had lead fragments and lead dust everywhere. And that was the main. So when we started, we were walking around the power station in full hazmat suits. Even the scaffolders had to put up all their scaffolding in a hazmat. That turbine hall was pretty much locked down for about 8 weeks while it was completely sealed and completely encapsulated. And all members had to use hazmat until that was, and even the scaffold, when it came down, it also had to be cleaned, every piece of it. So the extent of scaffold used internally was, again, enormous, because every surface had to be accessed. I can't give you an exact figure, but it was a considerable part of the budget went into hazardous materials.
Great, thanks for that. And I hope you also recorded all of yourselves in the hazmat suits as part of the record.
We definitely did.
Great. Another question, this time for Paul Viney from Julie Collins. Julie's asking, you mentioned drawing up in detail the stonework, and that you showed some very fantastically detailed drawings. All that documentation you produced, is it being cared for and stored so as to enable access and retrieval of the drawings in 50 years' time?
Yeah, the Parliamentary Library has been entrusted with the responsibility of getting all the information, including samples of the product, including the drawings, but also all the block schedules. So there's actually a block schedule for every block in the building. So they've been entrusted with capturing all that and then storing that for posterity for future renovations.
Great, thank you. Look, I had a question for Andrew and Sam. You mentioned the straw ceilings. Were they Solomon panels? And you mentioned how the industry sort of had to was being revived. How did that come about? Because you could have actually recommended that straw wasn't used.
Yes, there are Solomon panels. I don't know if you're aware, but Solomon started in South Australia, and the plant was based at Freeling in north of Adelaide. I think after the project actually was completed, Union House project in 1975, the owner actually sold the business and it was moved to Victoria, Matoa. The plant's based in Matoa. It's the same plant. So basically, getting in contact with Solomon, they basically ramped up production. So they actually brought some people out of retirement to. We had some issues early on because when we first started the work, it had been a particularly wet season. It was wet in Victoria, so a lot of the straw had mould in it. So we had to face some problems, but basically we replaced a lot of the straw because the original straw actually had basically retardant in it, which made it difficult to reuse. We did reuse and remove and reinstall some panels, but more recently the decision was made to replace them. In terms of decision, we had lengthy discussions with Heritage SA about the straw ceilings. The university was very reluctant to put the straw back up. But in actual fact, I mean, it's actually a great material. It's a really cost-effective material. It has a great sense. It has great acoustic properties as well. And basically, areas where we had problems with accessing services, particularly above ceiling, that's where the straw, had previously been cut and started fraying. It was looking terrible. We did come up with an alternative in those areas, but we're very happy with the end result.
Great, and it's also a very sustainable material. So
absolutely.
Yeah. A question for me for Toby.
Yeah.
Toby, I was fascinated by the tower. You said was sort of untouchable, and you didn't want to touch it. But were the other structures on the site? Were they have close heritage controls internally, or was it a sort of planning control for the exterior but not for the interior? I'm interested in that balance between adaptive reuse and restoration and how you manage that.
Yeah, look, it was quite complex actually, because the building was on 2 titles, and one of them was the town hall title, and that covered the back area, which was the shed, which was a 1970s shed and really of no heritage value. And then the most of the buildings that we touched were really just probably more exterior rather than interior. The interiors had been quite damaged along the way. So if anything, we were revealing those more. And the tower, it was, that was the only thing that we absolutely could not touch.
Right.
And so there was a heritage advisor with that the council engaged. And so she was quite supportive all along. But everything had been done at different times. So like originally, I think they were probably timber floors, except the main where the fire trucks would have gone, and then they'd poured concrete in later on, but different levels in every room, and so, there was all sorts of strange things that just kept happening right up until I think the 80s. So it was hard to, we had to sort of pull back things and just erase things until we felt like we need to stop.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, look, Hannah Louie has posted a question, one of my co-directors at ACAHUCH, and asking, and this is really a question for everyone on the panel, is the Conservation Management Plan still a useful guiding document for adaptive reuse projects of historic sites? And I guess just if anyone on the panel wants to sort of jump in and tell us about the importance or significance, or I noticed, Robert, you're constantly updating. It seems like it's a dynamic process for the CMP.
One word to that answer is absolutely. I think most people who've just presented have said they've written the CMP, and that gives you an intimate knowledge of a building. And being architects, we also understand it architecturally as well. And that is a big bonus because we understand the issues and what threats that pose on a building, not just tangible but intangible threats, and tangible, I should say. And so I think it's incredibly important. If anybody wanted to add something, but something that we've been introducing to our CMPs and has been tolerance of change tables. So that allows you to also get into the nuts and bolts of things, but also resist getting into too much detail in significance diagrams as well. Quite often clients want to push you to write significance for each room down to the skirting board, and we think that's dangerous and it's a thin edge of a wedge. It will always need a heritage consultant or a heritage architect to review when major works have been done. So it's hand in hand, but it's very important.
Sure. Paul, did you doing the stonework for over, I think you said 18 years. Did the CMP remain sort of relevant the whole way through, or was it adjusting itself as over those?
No, Philip, it remained relevant all the way through, but we've done the whole range. We've probably done 150 odd projects in the Parliament building over that period of time as well, and it was actually the cornerstone of every project. Now, it was written back by Sir Balderstone.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it was a high quality document, and it's still as relevant today as it was then.
Great. And Tina, do you have a comment on the CMPs?
Yes, I agree with everything that Paul and Robert have just said. I think my only point to add is just the value of having that research, like especially if it's a CMP that's being done in-house, like the time that you were just able to spend to do that research and the amount of information that you get has just been so valuable, especially to the Tower Hill project, like being able to see all the correspondence and specifications. If it was just an architectural project, it would be pretty hard to justify those costs.
Sure. And Andrew and Sam, any final comment on the CMP question?
Totally agree, basically, with all those comments. The CMP is just absolutely critical to any decision making. As Robert said, it's very hard to make decisions unless you really understand the place and understand the significance of the fabric that you're dealing with. In actual fact, the previous CMP that had been developed for this site, one of the things we've found interesting has been more historic CMPs have often been developed without the context of actually having the owner's input. Some of the CMPs that we deal with are quite old, and that's actually quite challenging because often it means you develop policy around what it currently exists. And I think that's what happened with the previous document. So also don't know that their understanding of some of the things were quite relevant. So one for us was the cloister. So the cloister was actually identified in the previous CMP as being basically the paving and things like that in the cloister was being of quite significant, but in actual fact, when we did the research, we realised it was totally against what Robert Dixon had actually wanted. It had basically been designed by a committee, so it actually freed up. We actually returned it more to what the original vision was the intention for it. So again, that value of that research is really important.
Fantastic. Look, I know we're just out of time. Look, I'd like to thank Tina Tam, Paul Viney, Toby Reid, Andrew Klenke, Sam Rosenberg, and Robert Gasparini very, very much for all your presentations today. I know we've gone over time, but look, just fantastic work being done, I think, across Australia, and we're very pleased we've been able to sort of open up this heritage panel more nationally than we have in the past. So I hope everyone enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing everyone again next year for the AIA Heritage Awards panel. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Philip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Philip.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks again.
Thank you.